issues: the nature of the universe, modern physics and old theology, human agency, the will of God, miracles, the role of faith, the healing community, modern medicine, phrases that hurt, the gifts of healing, we aren't Jesus and we are Jesus, and when the end comes. He says, I figure it will take 3 to maybe 4 hours tops. But he said, I'm going to have to pick one of those and resist the temptation to take the tempting side excursion into some of the others. So if you were at Jim Doty's congregation this morning, you'd be in for a 3 or 4 hour sermon on all of those topics. So, oh, he could do it easily. Yeah, he wouldn't have any trouble doing that at all. Yeah, he definitely could do that. Melissa always says that what he does is he starts unwrapping boxes, but every box has got another box inside of it that you have to unwrap. So when you're with Jim, you just keep getting, little smaller and smaller boxes all wrapped up. So anyway, as I mentioned, our theme today is Come and Be Healed. And they suggest we start out by looking at one of the hymns in the hymnal. So what I thought I would do and what they suggest is that I'll read a verse of the hymn. There's 4 verses. So I'll read the verse of the hymn and then I'll just let it be quiet for about a minute for you to meditate, contemplate, pray, vision, whatever. See if something speaks to you in that verse. And if you're really good at meditation, like Melinda and some others, 1 minute won't seem near long enough. And if you do really bad at, like I do at that, a minute's going to seem like forever. But it kind of depends on how well you do with that. So this is the first verse. God, renew us by your Spirit. Come in gladness, hearts console. Grant us joy so we may share it. Oh, restore us, make us whole. God, revitalize our mission. Bless your church from pole to pole. May we overcome division. Oh, restore us, make us whole. God, revive each congregation, be our center and our goal. Help us join in adoration. Oh, restore us, make us whole. God, refresh your whole creation. Timeless is salvation's role. Grant us boundless celebration. God, restore us, make us whole. So, did anything come to you as you had chances to meditate on any of those? Did you get any insights? Anything kind of speak to you in any of those verses? By the way, that was only about 40 seconds. I couldn't go a whole minute. So you only got about 40 seconds, huh? No, 40 seconds. I couldn't even do a whole minute. So.
The question that came to my mind is if people like me who cannot concentrate or meditate very well, if we were all united as maybe some of those who are able to, would it be more meaningful? Would God pay more attention? With this prayer that we're asking, and that's what it is,
Mm-hmm.
prayer, would be more likely, well, am I holding the group back?
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I mean, I would like to think not, but I hear what you're saying. It's interesting because Carla Long, I don't know how many of you know Carla. She's a World Church appointee, and I can't remember where she's at, but she's, you see her name a lot at conference and stuff like that. But in the New Herald, she has an article, and she's kind of in our boat, Rose. She doesn't do well at it either. She talks about, she says, she does that one that we've all talked about. It's like, okay, I'm just really going to focus. I'm really going to cut. Oh, is that a squirrel? I mean, it's just, so that's the way she starts out. Yeah, exactly. That's how she starts out her article. And so, but she talks about how that she is committed to the process. And so she says, I may make 30 seconds today, maybe tomorrow I may make 31 seconds. I don't know. She said it's kind of a, up and down a little bit. But it's kind of nice to hear somebody who, like Carla, who admits that she struggles with the same thing. So I don't know what it is that does it. Melinda could meditate and loves those parts of the service. So sometimes when I'm doing the service, I try to put a place in there where there's just some silence, just to give her some time to kind of get in that place or whatever. But I think it's an interesting question. I guess I would hope that we're not holding others back by the fact that we can't really stay on task.
Well, I try to make myself feel better by the fact that God made us all so different.
Right.
And He made me different.
Yeah.
I'm turning him into a male. I don't like to do that. God made me
right.
this way. Does God want me to change and be different than what I am?
Yeah, I think those are valid questions, and some that I've struggled with as well. Different issues possibly, but I struggle with that too as I think about things like my temper and stuff like that. And it's in there, and God knew it was in there, and so sometimes I wonder how come God hasn't fixed that for me. So because He and I have talked about it a lot.
I have been criticized for my lack of temper. So
yeah. Any other thoughts as we read those verses through? Any words or phrases or word pictures jump out at you as we read through those? Anybody?
Well, the wholeness. Because that's almost every phrase
right.
With make us whole.
Make us whole.
Make us whole.
Yeah. I really liked the line, "Grant us joy so we may share it." That was a neat line for me. I think that joy in a lot of ways is understood in our life sometimes, and we confuse joy with happiness, and they're really different, I think. And so I like that line that said, "Grant us joy that we may share it." Any other thoughts? Anybody? Anything click with anybody? When you think about healing, the theme is to come and be healed. What other words come to your mind? Melinda mentioned wholeness. What other words come to your mind when you think about healing or being healed or even just heal? Any other words come to mind? I wrote down a little list, but...
Well, mostly, I think we think of healing as...
Rejuvenation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one. That's one.
Or I was going to say, when we went to see Uncle Ross. What in that situation is healing? Do you want him to return to normal, which what most of us think about healing,
Right.
make me the way I was,
Right.
And that may not happen in this case.
We need the microphone.
Oh,
I know Ralph doesn't have his ears on this morning, and he never can understand the language.
okay. Yeah. I just turned it on. Go ahead.
We think of health, get me back to the way I was when I wasn't sick or
Right.
I wasn't, but sometimes healing may take a different form than that.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of the words that I had are what you were talking about: renew, restore, revitalize, refresh. All of those kind of have to do with going back to some better place or some, more healthy place or whatever. So a lot of words that I wrote down when I think about healing kind of take you back to that place. But I think what you said is true, that sometimes healing may take a different form than we visualize. Because I also thought of healing as uplifting or affirming or strengthening. Those all spoke to me kind of in the sense of healing or being healed. Would be to we left soccer game the other day, and at the end of the soccer game with these little 4 and 5 year olds, they everybody gets a sticker, but somebody gets the medal for the day. For whatever reason, the coach decides they get the medal, and one little guy yesterday thought he should get the medal, and he didn't get it, and so he was just wailing at the end. And as we were leaving, he was kind of standing against the wall crying. And Carson went up to him and he said, "It's okay. You may get the medal next week and you'll be happy." And so I thought about that as a way of affirming. To me, that's a healing kind of response to somebody. That's a way of trying to uplift or affirm or encourage somebody who's down. And that could be, especially from a teammate, because Carson didn't get it either. I could see where if it was the person that got it would come and talk to you, that might not carry much weight. But Carson didn't get the medal either, but he's over talking to this little guy and saying, maybe you'll get it next week and then you'll be happy. So I thought of that when I thought of healing. That's a healing kind of thing.
Do you think there should be a medal given to one person?
The
MVP or?
And the coach is usually pretty good about saying why that person got it that day, to kind of, I guess, show the other kids. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting question. You're right.
Yes, they should. I am so tired of this. Everybody wins crap. Everybody is equal. Everybody's fair. No, get out there, you work your butt off, and you do better. That's life. It's the same at your job.
Yeah.
If you work hard and do better, you get rewarded for that. If you did slack, why should they get a medal? I don't care. That's life. Now we've got all these little kids that, well, I should get an award for it. No,
Right.
You're lazy, you do nothing. No, you should not get the medal.
Yeah.
You get all these little mamas that want all the kids to get a medal, and
Right.
they don't deserve it. And then we teach our kids that everybody should get something, that they don't have to work hard for it, and then they get out in the real world and it slaps them down.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
A little bit of a soapbox there.
Drives me crazy. No, he sat in the corner and did nothing. He should get nothing.
Yeah.
Or a kick in the pants.
All right. So anyway, so then they have us. They talk a little bit. All right. So let me read the scripture for today. The scripture's from Mark, and we won't be probably. I don't imagine Desiree's going to use it because I think Desiree's got a service that she's got planned, so she probably won't use it today. But our scripture's from Mark 1, chapter 1, and it starts in verse 29. And I always hate it when so the scripture starts out, as soon as they left the synagogue, So then it's like, okay, I got to go back and figure out who they are, what they're doing in the synagogue. So anyway, Mark starts out, Mark doesn't do, obviously, the whole birth story and everything like Luke does. So Mark starts out with John the Baptist. John the Baptist is preaching the baptism of repentance. He baptizes Jesus. We see the Spirit come down like a dove and land on Jesus' head. And then immediately Jesus is out in the wilderness for 40 days in Mark's gospel with the wild animals and the angels, it says. And then we find out that John was in prison. Jesus is in Galilee, and he begins to preach the good news, and he begins to call his disciples. So he calls Simon and Andrew first, and then he calls James and John, and then it says that they go to Capernaum, and he's in the synagogue to preach. He casts out a spirit, and the people are amazed, and the word spreads. Then, starting in verse 29, as soon as they left the synagogue, so that's what they were doing in the synagogue. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. That evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door. And Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. So that's our scripture today, Mark 1:29 to 39. And that's where the idea comes from being healed. So they have some discussion in our lesson today about Simon's mother-in-law. And, you know, the cynic would say, well, as soon as she was healed, she got up and started doing her female role of serving the people. I could hear Rose already, I could hear her brain already thinking that. Yeah, not loud, just loud enough that I knew that that's what you were thinking. But you know, what the sermon helps point out is that all of us are called to minister to one another. And so she wasn't necessarily doing her, quote, female role. She was doing her disciple role, which is the disciple role any of us are called to serve and minister to one another. So it happened to be that she was a female. It happened to be that it was her house, and it happened to be, you know, that she got up and began. But it could have easily been a story about a guy, and Jesus lifted the guy up, and the guy went and began to do whatever it is the disciples do. So anyway, just kind of is what they say in the lesson, that she began to just be involved in servant ministry, and servant ministry is what we're all called to. So they talk a little bit then now about the whole idea of touch. And if you think about our sacraments, how many of our sacraments of our church involve touch? With the administration to the sick, you lay hands on somebody. Ordination, you lay hands on somebody. Blessing of babies, one of you holds the baby, the other one usually puts hands on the baby. Ordination prayers, confirmation prayers, even baptism, you're holding someone in and out of the water kind of thing. So just think about all of our, you know, and even if you go a little bit farther, the bread was touched by hands when we share communion. You know, the wine was poured with hands in a sense. So really that idea of touch really is in all of our sacraments. And I think that's one of the reasons for me why the sacraments are so powerful, is because there is that physical connection. A lot of times I use the term, this way of reaching down and touching people in a concrete way. But I think that's really true. I think that when we perform the sacraments, or when we're a recipient of the sacraments, there is that sense in which that touch, it just makes a connection that you don't necessarily just make When someone says, "Well, I'll pray for you," that's a really nice thing. I'm not saying it isn't, but there's something about somebody putting their arm on you. And I remember years ago, one of the first times that I can remember, Melinda and I at Greenwood decided to do communion where we had people come forward, and of course everybody says, "Oh, that's too Catholic" and all that stuff, but I think there are times that really fits the theme and does some interesting stuff. But the thing that really, really impressed me about that service is obviously the wine takes a little longer than the bread. And so when you're going through the line, well, John Mendenhall had the bread, and I don't even remember, it doesn't matter who had the wine. But the line kind of began to build up a little bit, as John would serve them the bread. And John reached out and put his hand on the shoulder or the arm of every person that went through the line and got bread from him. And as I sat there up front and watched that, I just thought what a powerful addition to the sacrament of communion to be touched like that by somebody in that way. It really meant a lot to me to watch John do that. That takes a lot of courage on John's part in some ways, to do that. It makes him vulnerable a little bit, but I just thought it was an amazing part to the service. And so one of the things they have us talk about then is when have you experienced healing through the servant ministry of another? And how did this experience lead you into a deeper awareness of Christ or Christ's missions? Or what need or desire do you have for healing? Is there something going on in your life that you're feeling a need for healing in some way? What new insights are emerging as you consider your response in servant ministry? And of course, they always want a commitment. What specific steps will you take to connect more closely with others and with God? But I thought we could just talk a little bit about when have you experienced healing through the servant ministry of another? And one of the ones that I first thought about when I first read that this morning was really Ralph and Bobby, who do so much here for, every time it snows, I just know that those guys are going to be out there shoveling the snow, doing their servant ministry. You just know that, and there's just something. I always bring my boots, and I always bring my snow shovel, and I get here, and it's almost always done already, because people have done that, and so to me, it seems so simple, but to me, it's such a powerful example of servant ministry in that way, and so I'm always ministered to by that kind of servant ministry. But what experiences have you had of healing? Anybody had an experience where you just really felt like some experience or somebody serving you in some way or another has brought healing to you?
I think I can't point my finger at a specific thing, but I think right here in Sunday school class.
Okay.
I have had questions, and I have got answers from you and others that has been healing.
Okay. Okay.
I think a lot of times it's just the...
Here, I'll run that back there.
A lot of times I think it's...
Nope, I think she turned it off.
You just want me to repeat it a lot, don't you? I think a lot of times it's the day-to-day stuff, like when Peggy texts me or calls me and says, "Hey, how's it going? How's Bailey doing?" Mm-hmm. And those kind of check-ins that so keeps you so connected and just really makes you, okay, not alone in this.
Yeah.
It's those little things.
Yeah, and that's a great example of servant ministry, I think. Any other thoughts on a sense of healing or
I think it's just hard to pin down something. I think we've all experienced.
Okay.
I was thinking about that young girl that was at the hospital that can't remember. Anyway, you got the notification that she came up from Colorado Springs or
Oh,
something. And there was so much family there,
Right.
you know, and so they were very receptive of having us come to say prayer for their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of one of those things where just that brought so many family members together.
Right.
Because we gathered around that little gal's bed and all held hands, and you said a beautiful prayer, and we visited her several times, but every time the family was very, very gracious.
Yeah.
And they weren't members of the church at all.
No.
And it was the church friend who was a teacher
Right.
of the little girl who
Right.
asked us to go up and visit with them. So it was kind of a two-way street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The healing, the ministry that you brought, and then the ministry of the family being so accepting of us coming and saying a prayer for their daughter.
Yeah, I wish I could remember her name. I'll think of it in a minute. But yeah, she was a student of hers, and when the church member talked to Melinda and I, she asked if we would go administer to her. And that's what I went in my mind with the thought to do with the oil and all that stuff. We got there, and like Melinda said, there was probably, maybe 8 family members there. The mom, the grandma, maybe sisters. I don't even know who all the family were, but there were probably 8 or 10 of them there. And to me, it seemed like a Catholic family, just as a guess. But partly that, yeah. But I just kind of made the decision that kind of trying to explain and talk about our sacrament of administration and stuff wasn't probably as important as the idea of prayer. So they all wanted to come in with us. And so what we did was Melinda got on one side of the bed and I was on the other. And I had one hand on the girl and Melinda did. And then we held hands with the family as we encircled the bottom of the bed. And so we said the prayers, but I didn't really feel the need that day to do the oil and the whole thing. I just kind of believed that the whole idea of the prayer part was more important than the oil that day. Now, when we went the other day and we administered to Uncle Ross, we did a regular kind of administration. I mean, we did the oil and everything. He wasn't conscious at all. I'm not sure. Marie says Ross isn't doing very well. This was even yesterday, that his body's just kind of shutting down. The organs aren't working anymore, and he's beginning to shut down. So I'm guessing it wouldn't be surprising if in the next, unless some miracle happens, that Ross is probably gonna be gone in the next few days.
Well, even when someone dies and there's a funeral procession or something and a service, there's a lot of healing from that too. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's an important aspect of the healing process.
Yeah, and I think that's true, Bill. I think that's really insightful, especially as, to me, there's so much, the potential for healing when community gathers, whatever that community looks like, whether it's a church on Sunday, whether it's a memorial service, whether it's fellowship and potluck at somebody's house. But anytime community gathers, I think there's the potential for healing to take place.
Well, and any of us that have gone through sight or any of the classes, we know that ministry is not in the structures and the rituals and the routines of what we're supposed to do. It's in meeting that person where they're at and helping them to meet God and to feel better about the situation they're in. It's not about, oh, well, I have to put the oil on your head and I've got to do it in this way, otherwise it's not of value. Exactly. Well, then we just shove God in a box, and God can't function any other way than our little box of what we say what the World Church says it has to be for ministry. Right. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I don't want to take anything away from ritual, because I think at times, and you're not doing that either.
In the situation with Uncle Ross,
right,
that absolutely was healing to do it in the ritualistic way. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I even, I don't know, some people say that people that are unconscious or whatever can still hear. And so for part of my prayer, I spoke to Ross, just like I do right here. It's saying somebody's in the chair. I speak to them about their faith, their journey, their needs or whatever before I kind of talk to God for them. So I did that with Ross too. Whether or not he heard, I guess someday maybe we'll know. But I think it's important for that part of it too for me.
Wasn't what I meant to talk about, but have you heard about that he's a man now, but when he was very young, went unconscious, coma, whatever, for 10 years. He knew everything that was going on, but he couldn't speak or move or let anybody move. And but what I held up my hand for was to talk about the healing for Jared. I know that you two have reached out, and that's so much to him. I don't know if any of the others have or not, but the fact of the matter, we speak to him twice a week, and whenever I make a report, and there's been times when you guys have clapped, and I tell him that.
Right.
I said, and that the congregation clapped, Jared, and this will mean so much to him. And the next week, next time I talk to him, he'll say, I've been thinking about that. And when Bobby said something about the other day about somebody recognized something in Jared, and I told him about that and Melinda's prayer for him, and he can't get over that. So it's, sometimes you're doing servant ministry and you don't even realize you're doing it, but when your thoughts are positive and you act on them, lots of times wonderful things happen.
And I think that's the spirit of that hymn, that talks about give us joy so that we can share it. But the same thing is true of ministry. We like you said, we've all been ministered to. We've all felt that touch one way or another as somebody reached out and touched us and healed us or affirmed us or encouraged us or whatever it is. And that gives us then not only the strength to do that, but just the desire, because we want to share that. We want to share that, what that felt like, with somebody else. And so I think that's a critical part of ministry is recognizing how much we've been ministered to, and then the desire to share that with others.
Bob,
I didn't want to hear him be breathing or something.
Bob keeps in touch with Mindy through Facebook, and they've been doing some computer not haggling, but he bought a couple of computers from her, and so we went last Sunday to pick up the one that the laptop that Bob was going to buy from her. And she asked about the congregation. She said, how is the congregation doing? And so we just spent a minute telling her about, how things were going. And so I felt really good that is a loving memory in her life.
Right. Speaking of healing, look who's here. Hey, sweetie. How are you?
We're all crippled up.
I see that. You're kind of all helping each other.
Betty.
Yeah.
All morning I've been looking over here and saying,
Did you do something you wanted to
That's right. Well, let's make her wrong.
how you doing? Fine. Oh. You just got
You
the
got
crazy
it out
time.
or something? No,
Okay, she
it's
can't get down there.
RSD. I went to the thinking school a little bit. It's a lot better than it was.
Well, we're just finishing up a discussion this morning. Our theme today has to do with healing. And so we're just kind of talking about about the different forms of healing, and we're kind of sharing story or testimony of how some of us have felt healed by the love or the touch or the concern, or Amy mentioned a phone call or a text. And when you
your hearing aid thing.
okay, we can take care of that. Do you like the one with the earphones like this? Okay. There you go, sweetie.
Thank you.
So does that help you a little bit?
Yeah.
Good, good. Okay. So we were talking about healing, and we're just about to wrap up and have some fellowship. But healing comes in lots of different forms, and by lots of different vehicles. And there's just a lot of ways that we can be involved in that sort of healing and affirmation and uplift of one another. Rose?
Just a few minutes ago, I was wishing Betty was here because I was going to talk about how her healing ministry has helped me in the past. Of course, she's been here a long time, and we both have. And some of my very first sermons, when I would be so nervous, not knowing how I'd done, it would be Betty that would call me, and she'd tell me, "You've done a good job." And you don't know what that done for me, Betty. I want to say thank you again.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I do think that. I think that even words like that, even encouragement like that, can be healing, and it can even be, and those are positive things. But someone could even share with you a critique out of love that I think can also be healing. I think that sometimes we can do that with one another. I remember when we were at the Denver congregation, we gathered at the back. I was going to be up front that day for a prayer or something. We gathered at the back, and one of the deacons there, really, really special guy, and we were standing in a circle like we do kind of back here in the office, and he handed me like a breath mint kind of thing. And it would be real easy to take offense at that, right? But how I viewed that was his love for me wouldn't have want anything to take away from my ministry if, in fact, my breath was a little bit bad this morning. He wouldn't want that to impact my ministry with somebody else. So I looked at that as a really loving gesture. And I looked at that as, when I can use these words, I could look at that as a healing kind of way, even though it'd be real easy to have taken offense at that, but that's not how he meant it at all, and that's not how I took it. So I think healing is kind of two-sided too sometimes, and sometimes we have to look at motives and all those kinds of things when people share with us too, that they're sharing their love and those kinds of things with us. So I would just, I guess, encourage you to think about and to continue to find ways to be involved in servant ministry and healing ministry and sharing with one another, the good news, the love, the encouragement, the affirmation, all those kinds of things that we get and do for one another as it's happened to us, and a way to share that with one another. So Jesus would invite us to come and be healed. So let's go downstairs, and I saw some really good-looking donuts come in the back door a little while ago. But that's definitely healing. Even if you have to be good and can only have a half a donut.